Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the New England Franco-Haitian Federation Rally Weekend. My name is Stacy Joseph, and I'm the social coordinator on the Federation. On behalf of everyone on the Federation, I'd like to thank you all for tuning in tonight and this weekend as we dive into life after this. If you're like me, you would have thought at this point this year, the pandemic would be a thing of the past. Although a lot of people were outside this summer, for real, we're not back to normal. So I invite you all to join us as we go into a panel discussion tonight talking about life after this. Some of us are used to church being virtual. Are we going back to church after this? Some people are questioning whether or not they're staying in the faith after this. Some people just question whether it's just their individual churches after this. Some people are struggling with their journeys with God after this, after we've endured different types of plights, unemployments, deaths, or whatever personal struggles and heartaches. We invite you all to say a prayer in your heart as we dive into a realistic conversation of where everybody stands after this. Before we get into it, I'd like to invite you, wherever you are, to bow your heads for a word of prayer. Most kind and gracious Father God, we thank you so much for all that you are. Thank you for allowing us to wake up this morning and to live to see another day. Lord, as we try to fellowship the best way we can in the safest way possible, I ask that you may touch every single person at the sound of my voice. Be with every single individual who's partaking in this, who's watching this, who will watch it at a later date, Father God. We ask that you may touch their hearts wherever they are and help them to figure out where you would want them to be after this. We ask you all these things not because we are worthy, but because you sent your Son to die for us. In Jesus' name we do pray. Amen. Thank you once again, and enjoy this weekend.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining the New England Franco-Haitian Youth Federation for our rally weekend. We are thrilled and honored for each and every one of you for tuning in tonight, but also to join us in an enlightening conversation about where do we go from here, but where do we go after this pandemic as well, too. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our panel. First, my name is Natalie Petit. I am parliamentarian of the New England Franco-Haitian Youth Federation. I begin first with Naomi Carlisle, who is an attorney, higher ed administrator, and also a member of Shishem Temple. Next, we have Rick Elian, who is a part of the Brockton Temple family, but also too a business owner. We have next Natasha Lawyers, who goes to Shekinah Temple, as well as she is a medical tech industry, but also to a faithful friend as well, personally. So thank you for joining us tonight. And then lastly, we have Pastor Cadet, who is the pastor of Cambridge SDA and also a grad student right now, and also to going into the field of mental health, but also providing that it's great for his church family to also endure in that ministry too, so thank you. So I want to go into March 11th. The World Health Organization declared the global pandemic. Everyone is in disarray. No one knows what's going on. What is a pandemic is one. What is COVID-19? What is happening? It's spreading all over the world. It's no longer away from us. It's actually close to home. So one of the things that we realized with this pandemic is that at the moment, uncertainty was real. Is this the end of times? What's happening? And so now, fast forward to November 2021, we're looking at a pandemic where, worldwide, over 219 million cases. We have about 4.5 million deaths. The United States alone, we had cases up to 43 million and around 600,000 deaths, still counting till this day. But close to home in Massachusetts, we saw over 18,000 deaths. But the thing about this pandemic that is real is that every one of us, either we've been diagnosed or have someone that has been lost by the pandemic, but also too, it's affected each and every one of our lives. Mentally, physically, spiritually. But what happens to the individual when we are trying to figure out ourselves, our lives, and how do we go about our daily, lives in any sort of way. So today's panel, we have different minds who come from a different lens of how they encounter the pandemic, but also to how do they go through their own personal challenges. How did you find the church? How was the church a community that you can go to? But also too, so much was happening all around the world. But how did we also, engage in that, but also how did we come out of this, this worldly manifestation that was happening? So tonight I want to focus on a conversation. Even though we have a panel, it's a conversation that has 4 tiers. As I mentioned earlier, is that we will focus on our personal well-being, we'll focus on the global issues, we'll focus also too on church and community, and also we'll give our audience some advice on how to handle their own spiritual discovery as they continue through life. As we said earlier, the theme being, where do we go from here? So my first question, enough of me, is, so March 11th, who, what, when, where, why? How were you feeling? What did you do? 3 months in to the pandemic, 6 months in, how were you doing? And how did you keep yourself sane? Let's start with that. So I'll start with Rick.
So March 11th, like you said, I am a small business owner, so I run my own fitness studio, and we didn't close down until March 24th. I remember the day, and I was like, damn, okay, this is happening. I had never done virtual trainings before, so this just was like, okay, something new for me, because, everybody typically was coming inside, and I had lost about 50% of my client base due to the pandemic, because people said, okay, you know what, they're going to take a break from training or not. So I was like, this is a lot. I didn't know what to expect. Prior to that, my kids, I have 3 kids, they were already on Zoom for class, so kind of was able to maneuver that. But then, now me having to do the same thing, literally had to hit the ground running, transitioned into Zoom. Those that stuck around, just tried to finagle it. So, used to having about 20, 30 clients a day, and that went into half of that. Was able to get a couple more clients through it all, but to me, the pandemic was a good thing for me, because I was running myself ragged. As a small business owner, I'm sole proprietor, I'm the one that's running it, but I'm also a PE teacher, so literally my days, I wake up at 4:30, I usually don't get home till 8, getting home at 8, still got to do worship with the kids, put them to bed, starting back over, I usually get about 3-4 hours of sleep. So the pandemic for me was a good reset, just to be able to take a break, so now I no longer had to wake up at 4 o'clock, I could push it to like 6, 7 o'clock, be done, have more time to spend with my kids, so it was a good thing in a sense. And then financially, as far as business wise, I broke even. So I didn't lose money. I didn't gain money. So I literally broke even, but the pandemic allowed me to just refocus my business mind frame and just hit the ground running from there to, where now I'm able to expand. In a pandemic, still able to expand, it's not something that's foreseeable, but by God's good grace, here I am.
So, Naomi?
Yeah, so it's interesting because you say March 11th, because that date is not as significant for me as the weeks preceding. I was working at the Department of Public Health at the time, and we heard about COVID, we knew about COVID, but didn't understand COVID. We were really focusing in on the flu season, and that was the top priority. And, here we have the global news starting to talk about COVID. Here's what's happening in China. It's coming to the U.S. We have a case here. And, of course, Massachusetts always wants to be first in everything. And so it's here, but we still don't understand the impact. And that quickly shifted. And, being the Department of Public Health, where you're supposed to know these things, how could they? Most people haven't lived through a pandemic. So I think pivot is an understatement for what had to be done at that time. And it was extremely scary, especially when you are the group that's supposed to be giving the advice and you're learning as you're going. So I guess by the time March 11th came, we were remote, which, was always impossible before the pandemic. Nobody could work remote because somehow we wouldn't be efficient, but somehow everything is still working right now, so that's great. So I'm really grateful. I'm grateful, but, I feel like my life has shifted a lot since the pandemic. Particularly, we've had quite a few deaths in the family because of it. And it was just, I don't know, you just could have never seen it coming. So that's really hurtful. And it also gives me a new, lens on life, because you're like, okay, I have to really live these days. It's not enough to be alive. I have to live. And that was extremely hard during the pandemic.
Amen.
It's hard right now, but we're pushing through. We're pushing through. So I'm not sure if I answered all pieces of your question, but I've been just chugging along. I'm one of those people who's been struggling throughout the pandemic. I know some people are starting businesses and things are great. Some people are just not well at all. I'm probably in the middle or not well at all. Like, it's really been a struggle, and I really thank God for sustaining me throughout this time.
Thank you for sharing and being vulnerable as well. Natasha?
I think that's a great question. So as I was talking to folks a little earlier, my case was a little unique because I was working from home prior to the pandemic starting. And in my industry, in medical technology, our company is worldwide. So we had heard about COVID, and we were supposed to work on some projects with some partners overseas, and we knew what was happening with them. And there were some people who were key individuals in the project who had either gotten sick or who had passed away. So we had a sense of how serious it was, but because it wasn't here, we didn't really fully understand the scope. And so I think, similar to Naomi, the date doesn't really have much significance for me because everyone around me was starting to work remotely, and I was kind of like, okay, well, welcome aboard, right? I have all the tips. But I think for me, what was tough was seeing a lot of my loved ones who work in healthcare, in hospitals, seeing them being afraid, but still going into work. Knowing people, especially in our church family, who got sick, and normally, you rally around the person, you go and visit, you go to the hospital, and you can't. So that was hard, but a lot of my routine, a lot of things stayed the same. During COVID, I think for me, the difficult part was not being able to engage with people, especially at church, the way that I had before the pandemic. So that was definitely the challenge.
Thank you, Pastor Cadet.
Yeah, first off, I just want to say I had no idea how much weight I would gain during the pandemic. So it's so good to hear that you're a personal trainer and you do virtual, because that's about to come in clutch. Because this whole process of reopening the buildings and having to put back on the suits that used to fit, like, let's pray. But no, so much changed. The date doesn't really stand out, but I do remember my wife and I, we were in Atlanta. We were ministering in Atlanta, and we just started hearing the news of like what was going on. And we decided, let's put on masks. And we wore masks on our flight home. And nobody else was wearing masks. Everybody else was looking at us like we're crazy. And I'm like, something not right. Something is not right. We are wearing our masks. And even though I felt a little crazy, I just sensed that a major shift was happening in the world. I had no idea what it would look like, because initially, pastors, we do a lot of work from home. So I was already kind of comfortable with that setup. But then the phone calls started to come in as, I'm seeing that people are getting sick. I can't visit church members who are in the hospital. I had no idea how many members we would lose during that time, and just the limited capacity. As a pastor, you want to be there. You want to do the home visits. You want to, perform the funerals in a way that really honors the person, and just those opportunities were lost. My wife is an ICU nurse. At that time, she wasn't working. She just passed the NCLEX, so now she's interviewing to get into a hospital and work in their ICU when the ICU is being hit the hardest with this stuff. So it was a lot to just see the world shut down. I myself, although every Sabbath, we were up and we were preaching virtually, I was having nightmares because every day I'm watching CNN. I'm seeing the death toll rise. I'm seeing that it's everywhere. And, I have parents that are a little older, vulnerable populations all around me. I was just afraid for everyone. So it took a little while to kind of settle into this new reality of like church online and learning to preach to an empty room and imagine the amens for yourself. But I also saw the opportunity to, with everything going virtual, to also go back to school. So I said, you know what, let me go back to school, and I enrolled in a mental health program. And I've been loving it, but there have definitely been major adjustments that have been necessary throughout the way.
One of the lessons I learned from you that I use a lot within my daily work is what percentage is your battery, your personal battery. Because one of the things that I learned in the pandemic, it was go, go, go. Pre-pandemic, during the pandemic, is we're also draining, physically, mentally. But I also want to realize some of the points that Natasha and you, and also Stacey's welcome made was, what does my community feel like when I go into isolation? As a Haitian community, when someone is down, someone makes a soup joumou, someone goes and makes, errands for the person, gets the grocery, we all rally around each other whenever there's loss, whenever there's pain. But that couldn't happen during the pandemic. And it's kind of still to this day, it can't happen. And even when it comes to loss, especially when you lose some of your biggest pillars in your church, it is very hard to mourn silently, mourn underneath a mask too. So I would say for the panel, and anyone can jump at this, what was your go-to community? Did you have a community? If you didn't find a community right away, what gave you solace? What gave you comfort in the midst of the pandemic?
So I'll just chime in. I think, so again, my case is a little unique. So I am an only child. So for me, I have relied heavily on my cousins, my friends, church family, things like that. So I had already established certain routines with certain people, like we meet up once a month and we go to dinner, or we go and do an activity. So for me, it was important to try to maintain that to a certain degree. So Zoom dates, happy hours, activities, painting classes, all of those things became the norm. But what I realized is there were some people, especially older adults, who I would engage with at church. Everybody is like your auntie or your uncle or something like that. They were not too tech savvy. So that was a little challenging to kind of, remain in community with them. But for me, it was really important to set up some type of semblance of community, right? In the summer, I remember when it got warmer, we did like a social distancing picnic type of situation, right? So we tried our best, right? But anything to kind of make, myself and other people feel like, hey, I'm still here, right? Like, even though we're all isolated in our homes, behind screens, we can come together, right? We still see each other. And so just trying to maintain our relationships, keep the bonds, and just stay active. For me, that helped. So having some kind of routine.
So I'll piggyback off Natasha. I too am an only child, so it's like, okay, it's normal for me to be by myself at the same time. I'm also divorced, so I have my kids every other week. So the weeks I didn't have them was a struggle, because it's like, okay, I'm in this house by myself. What do I do? But what helped was the virtual sessions. Knowing that, okay, I would interact with clients. The first few months of COVID, I literally got cabin fever because, again, I'm used to being around people, and not really going out was tough. So I'm like, wait, I have my own gym. Why am I staying home? So I use that opportunity to go out. Like, I can go work out by myself. And I was, like I said, being a PE teacher, I was still doing my sessions with the kids via Zoom, so I would do it at the gym just to get out the house. You know what I mean? Because when you tend to feel trapped. So it's just trying to find little things to do. to keep some type of normalcy. I'm also the assistant youth director at church. So with that, we did Vespers and AY every week, literally just to make sure to try to keep active, not only for ourselves, but our youth engaged. So things like that allowed us to keep a sense of community and come together. It wasn't the same because, you're not able to give anybody a hug. It's like everything was like, I know my icon on Zoom is a virtual hug, just so, because that's just me, you know what I mean? So it's weird not being able to fellowship the way you would like, but it was trying to find a different way to just find a new normal.
So I'm going to speak for the people who are not only children and
Come on.
who grew up in
Right?
community. I'm going to speak for you.
Thank you.
So for me, the pandemic was very isolating. Feeling like if I go see someone, I might kill them. That was the message that was being portrayed, and that's how we felt. Like, if I care about someone, I should stay away. And it's always been the opposite thinking. It's always been, if you care for someone, you should contact them, you should go see them, you should, and this is the opposite. If you love them, stay away. And that was very difficult. And like I said, we had some sick family members who couldn't go see them. Then, then we had some funerals to attend. We're like, well, what are we going to do? Are we not going to show up for a funeral? Are we not going to bury uncle? Like, what's going to happen here? And then we took our chances and we went, God, we're still alive, thank God. But it was just, for me, I felt like, I say it's isolating because I feel like in these times where you really needed people to be around, especially if you've grown up with people always around you, or if you're the type of person like me, if you're an extrovert, you go out for fun, like you look forward to dinners, you look forward to outings, and that's stripped away. And now you have to somehow, balance yourself within the house, and that's difficult when your practice is otherwise. So for me, it was very isolating. I'm so happy that we've made some progress and that we're even able to have a panel like this at this time. This is something that could not happen last year. But it's still scary because we're still in a pandemic. And church online is not the same. And Haitians on Zoom is perfect. I love Haitians on Zoom. I love my people. I got to speak for my people. Mbaka tondo, mbaka well. I feel like if we knew, we would have had a tutorial, but we didn't know. We didn't prepare. We were not ready. But we got the louange going, and I'm proud of my church. They pivoted very quickly. They've been doing it every week, and I see all the churches are going, and it's so nice to be able to visit different churches virtually. But my Haitians on Zoom, unmatched. Yes.
Community-wise, everything you just said is so on point. For me, I was chilling. Like, I'm an introvert, and my job requires for me to have extroverted tendencies. So, I exercise that. But at the end of a Sabbath, I got nothing left. I don't want to see anybody. I don't want to talk to anybody. I need a full day to, recharge. So you were shocked that I said I'm an introvert. But I'm very deeply an introvert. So I was fine. I was running in daisies. I was chilling. I was so good to go. And it was important for me because I feel like I was reaching a point of burnout. And the scaling back of so much of just the level of engagement that I had to do as a pastor was helpful to just reset, refocus. It was still very challenging because it's like there's still a pandemic going on. And also, it was issues that typically get to pastors sooner were getting to me much later. So it's like you're catching things that you would typically catch stage 1, you're catching it stage 4 now, because you're not able to see that, hey, that person hasn't been sitting in that pew for this long, or, you look into a person's eyes on a Sabbath morning and you're like, something's not right, let's meet, let's talk, let's have lunch this week. It's important for me to say that because I don't want people to watch this and feel like, oh, pastor was good. No, there were definitely challenges, but on the community side, I didn't want to talk to anybody. I was good to go. I was chilling. And I needed that reset. I needed everything to shut down, to just slow down for me, and for me to get back into community in a better, healthier way.
So speaking of introvert and extrovert, I know Natasha and I talk about this. She's just like, you're not an introvert, Natalie. And I'm like, yes, I am. I love my naps.
There we go.
But I wonder, though, too, what did you learn about yourself throughout the pandemic that you could say, I would like to carry this forward? I know for me personally, I would check on everybody. Holidays, I have my how you doing, but I wasn't receiving it in return. And so it's one of those where I was like, but are you taking care of yourself? How are you doing? And so for me, I started therapy because I was just like, because I need to figure out how I'm doing. And so that's where you're just like, I need to carry something out of this and not be like, Naomi said earlier, not be the same that I was pre-pandemic or even during the pandemic, but maybe be a better person. So for you guys, what would you say that you learn about yourself and that you continue forward?
I would say for me, I'm a workaholic. I grew up with a single family parent household. My mom went to work, had vacations, still went to work. She paid it out, went to work. So I'm used to working. So because of the pandemic, I realized like, okay, I need to scale back. I'm doing too much. So taking Monday afternoons and be like, I'm not going back to the studio. No longer going back on Fridays, shorter days on Sundays. So just making sure that I'm spending time with myself and doing things just for me or doing things with just my kids and not all about 6 Fit. You know what I mean? So taking back my time, knowing that I needed to make sure that I'm living for them so that I don't burn out and then their father's gone. So that was important for me. I think that's why I didn't mind the pandemic in a sense, because I needed that physical reset to just not be burnt out.
Well, I learned that I don't have to pastor the way I used to pastor. I'm a doer. I like to get things done. I like to be present. I like to be hands-on and to see things go a certain way. And now, because of what the church endured during the pandemic, I'm realizing like we need to still be church if the building is closed. Correct. So now the onus is, am I equipping the people, right? If I'm doing it, then they don't feel the pressure to be equipped to do it themselves. So my whole mindset to pastoral ministry has shifted from doing to now equipping. And y'all gonna do it. Or you're not gonna do it, and you're gonna be upset, but you're gonna be upset with yourselves. Because I equipped you to do it, and you didn't do it. So shifting away from that level of responsibility of like making sure everything gets done, I think it set me free from leading from a place of guilt. Because I like to lead from love. Like, we're doing this because we're supposed to be doing this, because we love the Lord, because we love each other. But like, pastoral guilt is a real thing when you're supposed to call somebody or check up or visit and you didn't have time that week, and then you see them Sabbath morning and then they're like, go to you, like, I haven't heard from you all. And that's tough. But shifting from like, I'm supposed to be everywhere and do everything to like, no, you guys are equipped. I'm going to push you into the water and I'm going to make sure that there's a life raft, but you're going to learn to swim, has freed me up from like, oh, I didn't hear from you, or, I didn't see you. And it's like, no, the church was there, even if the pastor wasn't there. And I know that that's upsetting for some people, but I'm still like, I think this is the healthiest model. I think the reason why so many leaders and pastors get burnt out is because we just feel like we have to be everywhere all the time for everything, and it's just not sustainable.
So like for me, one of the main lessons I learned is that God is God alone, because I felt like, that story in the Bible where they were like trying to build the ladder to heaven and stuff, and I feel like sometimes we're doing that because we're trying to do so much good, we're trying to live out our faith and do the works, but we don't recognize that we're leaving God out of it. And I felt like, so the second lesson I learned is it's okay to say no. One thing I learned with my uncle passing is just being reminded how much life went on. It was as if nothing happened, just life goes on. And so for me, I'm like, okay, it's okay to say no. I don't have to be everywhere. I don't have to call everyone. I don't have to do everything. And that really gave me a pause in my life. I think God forced a pause on me, or all of us. But I could speak for myself because I feel like I would have never paused. I would have never stopped. I thought I knew God, but I could tell you now I know God much better today than I did a year and a half ago. I feel like I knew nothing, and I don't even know how I was leading with that limited knowledge I had, because I feel like now I'm at a space where he brings you, you're so vulnerable that you can only rely on God, and you're like, wow, only rely on God, that's the best thing, like, thank God I have God, right?
Right.
So that's what I've learned. I'm like, yo, God is God, like, let him be God. And you do what you have to do, what he's called you to do, but you don't have to feel the pressure to do more than that. And I've always felt that pressure. And now I don't. Now I feel like, God, tell me what to do. Tell me what steps to take. And I try my best, you know, sometimes I still fail, you know, he's still working on me. He's still working on me. But that's what I'm really grateful for, is really seeing God in his essence, in his true essence, and learning how to really rely on him.
Yeah, I think along those same lines, that was pretty much the same lesson for me. I think I just learned more so to trust God when he tells you to do something, right? I think my personality is very type A, like I need things to be like a certain way or else I'm not going to do it because it's just going to fail, and then what's the point? But a lot of times that's us not believing that if we take that step forward, God is just going to take care of the rest, right? We want to have everything set up, everything go according to plan, when God doesn't need that. He just needs you to have the faith to just take that first step. And so there were so many different things over the course of the pandemic that I remember just sitting back and being like, God, I feel like you told me to do this, but because certain things didn't line up, I didn't want to take that leap. But it was more of like, okay, well, why not now, right? So, you know, a lot of things ended up working out quite well. So that's just something I want to carry with me. Just go, do it. If God is speaking, allow him to move and just follow.
Because I would say this whole pandemic, God has definitely spoken to each of us quietly. I would say in the past, we're like, how does God sound? You know, was that a sign from God? But he came in mysterious ways, whether it was for those who probably could not go to bed, because you're just constantly stressing and thinking, and it's him saying, be still and know that I am God. Or whether it was, you know, for healthcare workers who have to constantly go in but are safely, you know, coming back home, but still having to worry and stress about it. But know that do not worry, you know, Matthew 6. So these are things where we always have to be reminded that he is still God, same God, and every day that we live our life, he will always be there, no matter above, beneath, behind, all around us. God is always a magnificent God. So right now, we're going to segue into our intermission, but we want to thank you all for joining us. And if anything, please feel free to share in the chat your comments. We definitely are reading your comments, so continue to keep commenting, and we'll also answer your questions as we return. Check us later. Welcome back. Thank you everyone for tuning in and sharing your comments in the chat. So we're actually going to start with one question that came from Instagram, specifically, But I'll preface it in saying 18 months have gone by. We have changed the way that we do church. Prior, we would condone going on Facebook and YouTube to get church, but everyone quickly shifted to doing church online. Because why? We were forced to do it. But then now, is the church still relevant? Is being Seventh-day Adventist and the protocols in which we always go to church on Saturdays, is that still relevant? What is it that, as Seventh-day Adventists of the faith who've been in the faith for so long, what are we doing? Where do we go from here as believers in the faith? Anyone can take this one. But I also want to say, feel free to let it loose. No need to be reserved.
I feel like this is something that was oncoming. It was going to rear its head regardless, because this is something that each of us has gone through in our own childhoods. Like, why do I go to church? Because that's one of those questions where the youth director will ask you, are you coming to church because you're coming with your parents, or are you coming to church because you want to? We all have grown up in the church for the most part, I would say. And I know for me, I've seen my group of guys, grad friends that have all gone to church, and then literally, let's say if there was 10 of us, there's maybe like 3 of us left that are still in church. So this is nothing new. It's just been heightened because of the pandemic, because of COVID. Now it's like, why do I need to come to church? What's the point? I can do church anytime. So this is an ongoing question, but now it's just like, it's a focal point that needs to be dealt with.
But to pivot off of that, dealt with in what way? Like, I know you're leading church and you're about to open up again. Like, what is the purpose of opening up again?
I think that's a big question, because online church is not as engaging as being there in person, one, and then two, to be honest, like the church productions online that people like to watch, like our churches do alright, we have Oakwood University Church, we have First Church, we have a few churches that are really doing it really well, CWC, and then there are the rest. And to be honest, in terms of online church experience, a lot of our young people are watching, Transformation. They're watching Elevation, and they've been doing it well way before, right? We over here trying to catch up.
Yeah.
So I think it's a big question, because for a lot of people, it's like, why am I going to listen to Pastor So-and-so? I've heard the sermon 3 times. Let me just tune in to, and I think it's hard for a lot of people.
Pastor Todd is down to earth. He ain't dressed up in a suit. He don't have a tie on. He looks comfortable. He looks like me, like I would on a regular day. So why not go to Pastor Todd?
He's preaching from a boat. Like, I don't know if y'all saw that clip.
No, I saw it.
Yes.
The other day he was on a treadmill preaching.
Yes, I saw that.
So he's changing the game. It's different.
Right.
Why do I need Pastor Cadet? No offense. Why do I need to go to Revision?
I asked the same question.
Okay, you asked the same question. How do you deal with that?
I think how we understand church plays a role in why we attend and why we join and why we stay. And I think that for a lot of people, we have been fed misinformation around why we join church, right? So if you've ever been to like a fear-based church, or you've heard fear-based sermons,
every Haitian church.
Exactly, right? That's true. Let me not say if.
All day.
Whenever you have, right?
My whole life.
That's said.
Yeah.
You've been told, like, if you do this, then or else you're going. Don't do this, or else you're going to hell. And it's always this, like, if you don't do this, then you won't be saved, kind of thing. And people are realizing, like, I can have a relationship with God without listening to this person or without going to this building. So I'll say this. Being Seventh-day Adventist, being a Seventh-day Adventist Christian is not about being saved. It is about mission. Like, we have a mission to not just preach the gospel, but to preach a particular message that will help people not be deceived. Mm-hmm. So in the very same way that we see it's important to tell people wear your masks or socially distance because of the gravity of what's happening in the pandemic, as Seventh-day Adventists, when what we understand to be the mark of the beast, what we understand will be widespread deception through religious powers and through the government, it is our responsibility through the message God has given us to warn the world and to let them know, like, listen, there's a warning label attached to this thing, the same way you get it for like your prescriptions, like this may cause ... Like, that's our job, to share Jesus and to also let people know this thing that is coming down the pike as people are losing their rights and losing their freedoms is going to be worse than the pandemic, more dangerous than the pandemic. And we as Seventh-day Adventist Christians have accepted the responsibility to warn the world, to share the message of the gospel and warn the world as well. And I think when people are in church just to accept the message of the gospel, but not to also accept the responsibility of warning the world, then it's like, what's the point of being Adventist?
So, okay, if I'm 18...
Can I say, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say that I think it's like we're phrasing it wrong when we say when we're in the church. We are the church. And that's what we have, I feel like we have lost in our traditions. We grew up, well, okay, I can speak for myself. I grew up waking up at the crack of dawn, getting ready for church, stuff already the night before. We got to be the first one there for some reason. I'm at Sabbath school, I'm at Divine Worship, then we in the afterwards, then we in Iklele, then we at some night program. It's like you don't leave till midnight. Next morning, you back in Pathfinder, like your whole life was enveloped in it. And I'm grateful for that experience because I feel like I feel tied to the church, right? And I don't want to dismiss the importance of community and meeting in a building, because in the Bible it talks about how Jesus went to the temple. He went to the temple to learn. He went to the temple to teach. So there's value in that temple. But his teaching didn't stop there. His work didn't stop in the temple. That was a stop, but that wasn't where his whole story ended. And I feel like so when our buildings shut down, our story shouldn't end. This is really where we begin. So we're in the end of times, and when we're in the end of times, we're not gonna have a building. So how do you show God? Like, how do you live as a Christian during these times? And I think this is the time, because what I feel is like we were in a routine. We were in Christianity routine, the routine of being a Christian. And now we don't have the routine, and are we Christian? We're questioning everything because we don't know how to work without a routine. We don't know how to do the 9 a.m. without the 9 a.m. Sabbath school. What do I do now? What do I do now? Now we're kind of forced to really commune with God and to really find out. And I know a lot of us are watching our online churches, or we may find the message better somewhere else. I do want to caution, though, that we are in the end of times, and it's important that we stay close to the Word, that we stay in prayer, that we stay in study, in addition to those, and to listen to that, because we personally are the church, so we also have an accountability too.
Okay, everything you're saying is cool. I've heard it my entire life. I'm 18, I'm 21. Why do I need it? What's the point? Why do I need to go to church? You're not telling me anything. You're telling me everything you're saying is everything I'm hearing from my parent. Why do I need to go to church?
You tell me.
I don't know why. I can get a relationship with God on my own without even being in church.
I absolutely, you can. I don't think you need the building to have a relationship with God. Yeah. So why do you go to church? Oh, go ahead, Natasha.
If I may, I think that's a really good question. And one of the things that I think I can compare it to is, if any of you guys have children, I don't, but the kids that I know, they struggled a lot with Zoom learning, right? Just not being in the classroom. They had all the resources. A lot of them had the tablets, the laptops, they brought the books home, they had YouTube videos, they had the teacher teaching them every day, but for some reason, it wasn't clicking the way that it had when they sat in the classroom, right? And so that's not to say that when we are in church, that's the only way that we learn. That's the only time that things click. But you can only go so far on your own. There's a degree that you're going to reach. There's a point that you're going to get in your own personal study, which you should be doing, right? No matter how many videos you've watched, how many pastors you've listened to, until you start to get around other people and share your faith and figure out, wait, I didn't understand this thing as well as I thought I did, or there's a whole other perspective to this that I'm missing, you're never going to fully capture that. So to that young person who is saying, I don't need church, I would say that I understand where you're coming from. I recognize that you can learn so much on your own, but why stop there? Why not put yourself around a body of believers, like-minded believers, who can encourage you, who can share with you, who can uplift you in a way that you can't when you're by yourself?
I know we have another question.
Yeah,
but I'm like bedside Temple is way better than having to wake up and do Sabbath school and do all this other stuff. I just want to lay down and
But
live.
what do you do after bedside temple?
Sleep some more and wake up and
So how are you passing this, this message, this ministry? How is it going? How is it being fulfilled? I understand when you go to church, sometimes you just get out, you don't stay. But, for the folks that 12 a.m., they're still at church, the ministry still has to live on beyond bedside.
But yeah, right. No offense to anybody here. All of us are at least 30 years old here on the panel. We're not 18, 20. Like, that age does not care about half of the stuff we're saying.
We used to be 18, and for
Yeah,
some of us,
but-
not too long ago. And I just want to say that because I feel like as much as things have changed, things kind of remain the same.
Yeah.
That is the age where you start to question things. Like,
Facts.
this is when you're not forced to go to church. You have, you're in college, and nobody's going to really know if you still went to church or not. You really have to make a conscious decision. Am I going to continue with this? And this is why the Bible talks about train up a child. Hopefully we have the training that we continue. But for the one that's struggling, like you said, why am I doing this? There is a big sense of community in church, as Natasha was explaining, that's indescribable and indispensable. But I feel like sometimes it's hard to understand that if you haven't been through some things.
Yes.
So what I could tell the 18 and 19-year-old is that you're about to go through something.
Yes.
That's it. That's
Okay?
it. Yeah.
And a lot of people have nowhere to run to. And if you have that church to run to, like I feel like, as I was in college, as I was in law school, church was my refuge. Like when I went in there, nothing else mattered. I don't know what it was. Maybe it's the Holy Spirit. It must be. Nothing else mattered, and I needed it. When my mother died, nothing else mattered. Like every life event I've had, the church has had my back. And I feel like that's God having my back. And there, even when God was creating Adam, he said it's not good for man to be alone.
Right.
We're
Even
not
Jesus had
created,
disciples.
right. We're not created to be in isolation. So while, bedside Adventist is really comfy and cozy, you have talents that God wants you to use.
Amen.
Exactly.
And
you're
we
gonna
need
grow
that
through
outside of the bedroom.
I want to just add one other thing. One of the reasons why a lot of people are saying, I'm not coming back to church, is because they're avoiding church drama. And that is not a remedy. That's just avoidance all over
Very
again.
true.
What if God put you in that church to teach you how to build healthy boundaries?
Pastor
And
Cadet, does every church have drama?
Every
Yes.
church has
Okay,
drama.
does every school have drama?
Every school has drama.
Every job have drama?
Every
Yes.
club has drama,
Thank you.
and they still keep going.
Hello.
So stop
Every
running from the
week.
church just because there's drama there. You're just using avoidance. The other thing I'll say is, like, if you're like me, like whenever there's like a free version of an app and like the paid version, I download the free version, right?
Amen.
But the problem with the free version is that it doesn't come with all of the features of the paid one. And if you're asking the question of what's the point of going to church, what's the point of being Adventist, I want to let you know you've downloaded the free version of Adventism. There are some things you have not unlocked, you
again.
haven't understood yet, and I want to encourage you to go deeper because it's much more than the fear-based or the I
do
just
as I
show
say.
up and I just serve. Like, there's so much more. So, like, just know there's so much more. Keep digging. There's so much more to Adventism, and when you discover what that is, that question begins to answer itself.
Thank you. One thing that I want to pivot to is our global issues that occur. So one point that Naomi mentioned is that I remember when I was in college, that is when I knew Christ for himself. Like we were best friends because I don't know who's going to pass those tests and exams. So he came in the final hour, every hour. However, I do know for sure when we were going through this pandemic, pandemic starts in March, but then 2 or 3 months later, a whole nother pandemic is about to burst, George Floyd. Now, I know, Hebrew 11 verses 1 says, faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. But the things that we did not see is our church show up and send their announcement or message, living to this mission, living to this ministry, declaring to the world, God will provide. I understand God will provide, but brothers are dying, sisters are dying, Breonna Taylor died, Ahmaud Arbery dying. But when it comes to civil, or when it comes to unjustness that we see throughout every day of our lives, but our church doesn't respond, what's the purpose of staying when I'm not even welcome within the church? Whereas black churches probably are the most powerful, but don't get the recognition as white churches. So my question for any of you on this panel is to, why stay?
Mercy.
And it's hard. It's hard even when you look at your job who provided a performance statement, not even an action statement, but how do you stay where you don't feel accepted?
Create your own world.
I mean, I may get some pushback from this, but I would say this is why we're called Christians and not humanins, because if Jesus left where he was not welcomed, we would not be here today.
Mercy.
I feel like we need to look at the life of Jesus and really study it and understand that we're not going to be welcomed everywhere. The Bible speaks to that too, but that's not a reason to leave unless God tells you to leave. One of my favorite Bible stories that has been ringing too true recently is about the story when Jesus was asleep on the boat. And the storm is ravaging, and everybody's going crazy. Like, man, look, how is he sleeping right now? Can't he see the storm? And this is like some of us right now, a lot of us are in storms. Things are rocky. They're beyond rocky. You just feel like you're about to capsize. Like, God, I can't take no more. Like, where are you? Like, the fact that you can change things with the snap or just speak on it, and you're not doing that right now. I feel like you're sleeping. So it's like, why am I pursuing this? Why am I still praying? Why am I going to, even if I'm going to Bedside Baptist, why am I doing that? Because it feels like there's no result, there's no progress, nothing is happening. But the end of the story talks about Jesus waking up and saying, and just calming the storm. And then you're like, well, Jesus, when you trying to wake up though? Because it's been kind of going for a little while now. And our time is not God's time. And God wants what's best for us. And I just want to say that being not welcome somewhere, unless God tells you to move, you stay. If God tells you to move, you move. Because where he has planted you, that's where you need to be. And that's hard to accept sometimes when there's so much around us and so much negativity. It's like every time you take one step, someone's trying to push you back 10. But then you have the life of Jesus to look at, where they killed the man. They killed them, And it's like, how far are we willing to do this walk with Christ? Is it only when it's convenient? Is it only when it's comfortable? Is it only when we're welcomed?
That was powerful. It spoke to me. I had to pause. Like, literally, stay where God tells you to stay. He's not giving you the roadmap yet, but that goes back to what Natasha said, the faith. You have to have the faith that he is going to take care of you. But any other pointers on this question?
Why y'all looking at me, waiting for me to say something?
Well, I was going to say, to be honest, I agree with everything you're saying. But to add on, this is what's going to happen to all of us. Because we're told at the end of times, we're going to endure persecution. We're going to endure a lot. So this is just preparation. And like you said, we do have to look towards the story of Jesus, the story of Stephen, and know that we're going to go through the gamut and we have to be prepared. And it's like, at that moment, are we going to stand firm and stand for Christ, or are we going to fold? So we're going to have to go through the storm eventually. This is nothing that hasn't been told to us.
So the one thing I'll say is that our theology is not in contradiction to standing up for social justice issues at all. The other thing I'll say is I'm done waiting for white Adventist leadership to step up and speak up for the causes and the rights of people that don't look like them. Now, I'm not talking about all white Adventists. I know amazing white Adventist leaders and pastors who have done great work in the social justice field. But I think all of us have been waiting for a statement from the world church to say something, right? So I just want to make clear, like, the North American Division has released a statement on where they stand regarding social justice and their support of social justice. Our conference, Northeastern Conference, our former president, Dr. Honore, as well as many others, led marches. We organized a march here in Massachusetts. So although we're not seeing it from the world church, I want you to know, one, it's happening. Two, it is so in alignment with our teachings. Like Adventists, because of our understanding of the Sabbath and hence creation, we should be the first people taking care of their environment. because of our love for Jesus, we should be the first people marching and standing up for other people's rights. Like based on our theology, we should be at the forefront of that. And
Not
again,
to cut you off, but a lot of times it seems like we're behind everything.
100%.
Speak on it.
Because we've been taught so much of our gospel has been colonized, and we've been taught a colonized version of Adventism or a colonized version of the gospel. And I'm just so grateful that we're going through this season where we're being decolonized. We're recognizing, like, look, we don't have to sing hymns every single Sabbath, right? We have a culture. We can sing our louange. We can sing our, things that represent our history and our background. So I think it's the process of separating what it has been culturally passed down to us by people who tried to make their culture biblical, and what is truly just the essence of what the Word of God says is still a difficult process for a lot of people, because even for us, like, I think for most of us, we only started singing like in Creole probably for like the past 15, maybe 15 years. Right, there we go, right? But before that, it was all just,
French hymnals.
That's it, French hymnal, right? And the fact that we're breaking away from that, I think, is powerful, and I think that it's going to give us the opportunity to reach more people that we weren't able to reach before. So, as a pastor, I take the time to let people know, like, listen, there's some things that were passed down to us by even well-intentioned people. It wasn't the full truth, or it wasn't, it was mixed with things that they thought were biblical that were really just cultural. And we need to continue to separate that, and people are going to get upset, and it's just going to have to be something that they get over, or they find another place to go where
They'll be
they're
all
more
right.
comfortable. They'll be all right. That's what it is. They'll be all right. They'll be all right.
So, time is up. And this has been an awesome conversation thus far. One thing I would add, though, is how do we hold our leaders accountable? And accountability is such a broad word now, because it's how do you apply pressure? How do you check on the receipts of all the commitments that the billions of dollars that was dedicated to diversity, equity, and inclusion across the board? How do we keep our church accountable as we head into our last question?
I think that one way to hold folks accountable is to get involved. If you sit on boards, if you show up to business meetings, if you town halls,
meetings.
if you show up, then you get a first glance as to what's going on, how folks are managing the money, whether or not the plan that was discussed last year was actually implemented. I think one of the things that, unfortunately, a lot of our young people do very well is talk about what they don't like, but then fail to get involved and do anything about it. I know for me, I did not fully understand how, or the business of church until I became our church clerk, right? There were a lot of things that I just kind of saw happening and didn't really understand and didn't really like, but it wasn't until I went to board meetings, it wasn't until I participated in things at the conference level that I was just like, oh, there was actually a reason behind this, right? So not that it's simply just getting involved and everything is going to change. No, especially if you are in a Haitian church, a West Indian church, people like their routine. They like continuing to do things a certain type of way. But I think when you are actually in the room and you are speaking up, you can potentially influence folks and make change and hold people accountable better by being inside versus outside.
Facts.
I agree with everything that Tasha just said. I want to answer the question, how do we keep ourselves accountable? Because I feel like we rely too much on our leaders sometimes, and then when we see no progress, we wonder why. And then God gave us so much talent, and we're not using it. And I think it's important to exercise that gift. Like, we're all here for a reason, I can't just expect the pastor to change the whole world for me. I have to also think about, like Natasha said, what can I do here to help? And so I think in holding ourselves accountable, something we need to think about is self-care. Number one is making sure that we're taking time for ourselves, we're resting, we're drinking water, like we're eating well, so that we could really, work for the body of Christ. And then we start thinking about how can we affect change. you know, and how, like, even if you're not an extrovert, you can write a letter. If you are an extrovert, go be at the front line with, you know, with your sign up. Whatever your talent is, there's room for everyone. The Bible talks about your gifts will make room for you. There is room for everyone, and you're needed. And when you're not there, there's a piece missing.
So I don't know if you're going to say anything, Rick. Okay, all right. So I'm going to show y'all how to apply pressure. From a pastoral perspective. It's more than 30 seconds. I'm sorry. I just got to let you know it's more than 30 seconds.
Them limit you, Speak on it.
So one, and so like Natasha said, you have to learn the system you're in order to learn how to work it, not in order to learn how to maneuver it. One of the biggest things we have as young people is our tithe dollar.
Yes.
The other thing you have to recognize, so like the conference responds to churches that are returning tithe. That's one thing to know. The second thing to know is that the Adventist church is a copycat church. And what that means is that once one church starts doing something and it works, the others follow. So if you want to change what's happening in your church, the answer might not be to try and change this old structure that has been happening for, you know, these 30, 40 years, but it might be for 50 young people to get together and say, let's start something new. Let's start our own church. Let's organize. Because one of the things I'm learning through my studies now is that a lot of how church is done is to soothe, and I'm speaking to our Haitian churches, it's to soothe our people who have migrated here, who came here, who didn't know the language, who lost their jobs, who had to start all over and needed to find a place that felt like home. So they came to the Haitian church where everybody spoke the same language and they created home. And now when we come in with our bold, fresh ideas and we say we want to change things,
they don't want no parts.
Exactly, because you're changing home. And then the challenge is that our young people, so they are recreating Haiti for themselves, which is an important part of the migration journey, right? But then your kids are growing up and you're training your kids, you want your kids to be Haitian, but your kids are more than Haitian. They're growing up in American culture, which means they need something else.
This is where they're losing a lot of young people.
Exactly.
Because I can speak for myself.
Right.
This is the reason why I left the Haitian church to go to the American church, because it's like, yo, my voice is not being heard. I'm trying to implement a type of change, a growth. Like, no, nous parlons ça.
Exactly.
We don't want that. We want to keep a tradition.
Right.
Go somewhere else. So it's like, okay, I'll take my talents somewhere else.
That's it. So, and listen, Cambridge, we benefit from this, right? Like, Haitians are in every department we have within the church, right? But the issue with that, and being born and raised in a Haitian church, is even, it happened in my church as well. If there were 50 of us, and there were 50 of us, maybe 20 of us made it to the Haitian church. About 15 stayed, the rest went into the world. Yeah. So I think it's so important for Haitian Americans to start Haitian American churches, because we're not going to be able to change home for les adultes. But our young people are growing up in spaces or they're going to church in spaces that are not always best suited for what they're experiencing, what they're going through. I'm not a fan for like completely detaching, but you know what I mean? But I think what Temple Salem has in terms of, you know, a young adult service is the beginnings of what is the beginnings of what we need. So the reason why I started with tithe dollars is because it's hard to get the kind of start we're looking for
money talks.
Without the money, right? So if a bunch of Haitian churches came together and said, listen, we're going to start a Haitian American fellowship for the area of Boston, for this area, for that area, we're still going to stay attached and support, you know, les adultes, because we're one big family. But if we did this, we could start a trend that changed Adventism. But I really, truly believe that is what the Haitian church needs, and something that we can do moving forward.
Can I just add that I feel like a lot of Haitian churches have progressed.
Yes.
Yes,
I have to
we have
say
to give them credit.
Yeah, because when I look at, you know, Salem, Philly, Sisham, hello, Pastor Jerome, they've implemented now an English service.
This is good.
You know, and this is a change. Yeah. You know, this is something we've always wanted to do.
Change too.
Didn't know how to, but it happened. It's happening now. So I feel like some of them, you know, they're listening. So I would say to the youth, don't completely give up, because we still need those Haitian churches to thrive too. Like,
100%.
you know, they need your support.
They will.
So that's my advice.
Because there's always people that's going to be migrating from Haiti to come.
But I think
they will, but they have to open their eyes and listen to the younger generation, because they can bring good change, but they're very stubborn and stuck in their ways.
I just feel like that's a blanket statement, and I think there are some people who are not as stuck in their ways. So
No, I agree
that's been
with
my
you.
experience.
I don't think it's across the board with every Haitian or in every Haitian church, but I think for the most part, a lot of our young people, they hit their heads against the ceiling and they're like, what do I do? So for those people, I just, if there were at least one Haitian American church in every city to just give people an outlet so that the 25 who don't make it to a Cambridge or the 15 who can't stay at their local church, there's somewhere else. Because it breaks my heart how many of my friends are now no longer associated with the church at all.
Facts.
And they didn't make it to the English churches in our area. They didn't stay in the home church. They just went their own way.
It's a generational thing. It's not a Haitian thing. If you're at a church where the generation is top heavy, like 40 plus, and they want to make all the rules and they're not listening to anybody below that age, you're going to have that issue everywhere. And I see that at the workplace too. It's crazy. And I think what we're all kind of saying here is like, you need to listen to people at all levels. Like if you only have people who are just like you, just your age group, you're not thinking wholly. To think wholly, have somebody from children, like a child, have the teenagers, have 20 plus. When you listen to their thoughts and you really implement, I'm telling you, I teach children ministry. These kids see things.
Oh yeah.
They know things.
Oh yeah.
And if we only took more lessons from them, we'd be moving forward.
I agree with you 100%.
And to your point, Naomi, diversity of thought is important. Whether it is in the church board, whether it is our leaders, all of us have been, leaders within our own churches. And with diversity of thought, there is that growth mindset. The church is willing to grow. We didn't have to struggle in the pandemic for most of our churches because they were able to see, okay, we should have had a good AV system pre-pandemic.
Right.
So struggle doesn't happen if you have diversity of thought, but you have to be consistent with the diversity of thought as well. So for our last question, it's a 30-second gem dropper. If you did not get to add or say something that was like, I want folks, our audience to know, this is the time.
Health is important. We have a health message for a reason, and it's for me, it's sad to see as a health instructor, as a fitness person, that people don't understand the importance of health. Health is important to keeping you happy. So never forget that all it takes is 15, 20 minutes a day to do something physical to clear your mind and de-stress. It's important.
Download the upgraded version of Adventism. No, legit. Like, and the upgraded version of Adventism isn't the person who knows all the theology and prophecy back and forth and never goes out to serve and never does any kind of evangelism. No, that is not what you're looking for. Find the people in your church and your community who understand the bridge between the theology and the mission, and they're living it out. That is a balanced Christianity, that's a balanced Adventism, and those are the people that really should have the authority and be teaching within our churches. So if you've been jaded or hurt, stop thinking that just because the person has the mic in their hand, like the pastor has his mic in his hand right now, that they're the ones to listen to. Look for the people who are living it out in their lives, who know how to love all kinds of people. Those are the people that you want to be around.
Along those lines, I'll just say get involved. Just be a part of your church community. It's not enough to simply sit on the sidelines, sit in the pews, or just watch from home. Even if you're not on the board, just get involved. Do ministry. God is calling us, like Naomi said. Each of us has something special that we can do for him, especially now in these days. So just get involved.
I guess I would say keep pressing on. I feel like life is difficult and we don't know what tomorrow brings, so that can bring on anxiety, depression. So be conscious of your mental health as well as your physical health, and seek help when you need it. And don't be afraid to let people help you. Sometimes we're so strong and we grew up in a culture where we can't let people help us, and I don't know why. It's okay, take the help.
Amen.
Take the help and it's okay, you're not weak because you need help. Take the help so you can come back even stronger, and so you can help your neighbor. So I want to just say, keep pressing on. Whatever happened yesterday, whatever happened this morning, whatever's happening right now, this too shall pass. When Jesus decides he's going to stop the storm, it's going to stop. God is still in control. You are not alone. God is with you. And if you need help, please seek it.
Yes. What she said, seek help. I think that
I
we
was
need,
just about to
we
say,
need to
yeah.
get away from the Haitian stigma
Yeah.
of why do you need to go to therapy?
Yeah.
It's important.
Yeah.
Very, very important.
Amen.
And if you are seeing signs, your behavior's changing, fix it. The longer, I think, goes back to when Rick was saying, like, I was living a fast-paced lifestyle and was not worried or focused on self. Eventually, those types of things that you're denying from yourself become to grow and grow in your relationships, in your job. If you're not focusing on yourself, who will?
Right. Avoidance is not a strategy.
Exactly.
Mercy.
Exactly. Alrighty, so thank you again, everyone, for joining us tonight. We appreciate your support of the New England Franco-Haitian Youth Federation. Feel free to also donate. We'll share that information in the chat, as well as tune in tomorrow morning for our rally weekend. So once again, thank you, Temple Salem, for hosting us. Thank you to our Federation officers, as well as you for joining in tonight. May God be with you, may God bless you, and may God shed his light upon you.
Happy
Be well.
Sabbath.
Bon sabbat, bon sabbat.